Guys, welcome to this wonderful episode of Marathon on Mondays with another incredibly inspiring and wonderful runner and a very dear friend who's put up with me at my absolute worst, Mr. Peter Bromka.
Hi, thanks for having me. Oh my, if that's you at your worst, we can get into it. You're still quite strong.
Yeah, you definitely, I think Sean still says to this day, I never want to see 12 a.m. Speed Project 5 Bex ever again.
But I, for those of you, those people who know you or have, been part of your classes, what I would say is you were quite quiet. You communicated a lot in your silence about how serious things were and how you were feeling. And I took your silence as a clear message that we needed to figure things out immediately.
When silence speaks volumes.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
We will definitely get into that. No, thank you for your time. Peter's going to be keeping a look out of the window because he is in Portland and in, as we just described, another episode of the video game of crap that life is right now. He's reached level 1021.
We're taking on a new challenge, which is staying indoors during COVID as a runner. So that's something that we're working on out here in Portland, Oregon.
Oh gosh, yep. Adaptations. That's what this year is all about.
Yep. In
the most annoying way possible.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to give you some background about how incredible Peter is. It's weird calling you Peter because you're Bromka in my mind. You are, I just think you're the most insanely fast runner. You're an incredible coach. You're a father, a husband. You've been running since you were born, more or less.
More or less.
Born into a running family, and that has stayed with you all day. Your dad is definitely somebody I want to talk about later on in this. But you probably hate this, but you, I think you were described by multiple people, and I think it then went into a lot of articles about you, that you were the fastest and most consistent marathon performer to not make it to Atlanta.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God. So we will come back to it because that is just your psyche. I think if you have never read anything by Bromka, go onto Medium and read his stuff. Or anywhere, just everywhere you write, is just amazing. Your words are beautiful. They are so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And you just, the way you explain things, I just always want to know whether that's what you're thinking when you're running. But having seen other people describe that intense time in your life, well, it's been a forever. But it started in 2005? That was the first time you ran Boston Marathon, right?
Yeah, I ran Boston as a charity runner originally.
And you immediately got your, you ran 308.
Yeah, 308, so BQ, and just the appreciation for what it's like to run. I started Boston at the very, very back. It was just alphabetical start, and I was running for Tufts University, so we were at the very back. And I thought, okay, here we go. And I kind of wove through so many people. It was like this amazing experience, but I was really exhausted by the end. Oh, my dog is whimpering in the back.
Is he singing? Oh.
He's looking himself in the mirror. Oh.
Got to that level where the dog.
Yeah, we're all looking for a friend.
Yeah. Hi, Pop. You want to come say hi? Yeah. Hey, buddy. He's like, can we just go outside for a run, please, Dad?
Yeah, so I ran Boston as a charity runner in 2005, and then I came back in 2006 and ran as part of, I think, the first wave, the second corral. So with some friends, and that was a fun experience. I definitely hit the wall, didn't quite understand how to fuel yet. I have a friend who I'd never lost to in my life, and he pulled away from me at mile 17, and we've never raced again. And he said, "That's it. I'm ending my running career on top." And just to feel that feeling of you know, I'll never forget that feeling of like, I'd run with this man for years. I knew like how to stay with him and I just couldn't. And to just be like, I'm just going to have to, you know, partition out my energy carefully over these last 9 miles and just to get to the finish. That was like a real learning experience for me that I think back on, even now that I'm like a lot faster than that. Is still like those feelings are still very consistent, of like those edges you come up against and need to, you know, work with. And so, yeah, it was, I'll never understand. I think my body got stronger. I got more mature. Sorry, trying to get.
All right, great. Life.
But yeah, I ran. So then for years after that, I thought I've run Boston. There's nothing really I need to. I'm a big runner on the experience of things. I love like the emotional culminating moment and the community of all coming together. And so having run Boston twice, I kind of thought like, that's it. I'm not sure if there's anything else I'm really inspired to do. I still ran 2 times a week for years, but I went years without really running any races. I think I ran like 1 track workout and thought like, that was horrible. I don't know why I did that. I'm so sore. But
I still think that about track workouts.
exactly. And just was not really engaged in what I think of as the traditional running world for years. I was just having a conversation with a few friends from the Stump Runners, which is our sort of local run crew as part of the run crews around the world.
Yep.
And I was telling them that at the time I met them in 2012, they were such a breath of fresh air because there was this different vibe of runner that was maybe newer to it, maybe hadn't competed in high school and college and run since they were a kid and just wanted to get out there and run together, and was very detached from like that track workout, you know, having to push right up, you know, asking what your PRs are like within the first 5 minutes of. And so I really enjoyed running with them because it was just this different way to approach the thing that I knew so well. So I got running with them a couple days a week, and then we'd supplement with some other days just for fun. And that kind of got my consistency going, which like, it always boils back to the same old things of like, consistency is everything in running. And just, if you can get going, you can stay going. And so I was running a couple days a week, and then the Boston bombing happened in 2013. And that's when I realized that I wasn't done with running and that I really wanted to compete at the Boston Marathon again. Even though it had been years and I had not really thought about doing it again because I didn't see the point. But a couple of friends and I texted each other and said like, we got to be there next year. And so that's what brought me back in. I ran a qualifier a few months later and got injured in the process because, you know, like, it's like all these truths of like, if you jump into too much too quickly, maybe you'll make it through, but like there's going to be some tolls. And so then I ran Boston 14, and that was just a tremendous day that really reignited my love for the running community, my love for running as part of my daily life, and has kicked off like what's been 6 years of this cadence of, you know, like 1 to 2 marathons a year.
Mm-hmm. And clocking times that are getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, that's the thing that like, I'll never understand how I just described. I ran 2:56 at Boston 2006. And then I took these years away, and I'm not sure if it was just sort of getting to know, becoming more mature, getting to know my body better, or I started doing some like strength training classes with my wife and going to those group fitness classes. But I'd always struggled with sort of soft tissue, like sore legs and sore hips. And I think some of the kind of like kettlebell and lifting and like very simple moves really helped fortify like the structure of my stride. Is the best I can guess, because when I tried to qualify for Boston, I ran 2:47. So I, you know, chopped off 10 minutes, and then I ran to Boston in 2:41 9 months later, and then I ran Chicago in 2:36 6 months later, and then took the spring of 15 off because my son was born. So I focused on that. But then the fall of 15, I ran New York and ran 234. Yeah. And then, yeah, just kept focusing on like, I've always seen it as just like this, because I've fallen in with this lifestyle of loving the cycle of training. Mm-hmm. To me, it's always been like one cycle with an appropriate break and all, but like thinking of one cycle as building on the last, and just trying to maintain. I'm not particularly type A and like everything has to line up. I think we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and a coach like who was really looking at my training would probably say like, we could tweak some details here, but at the same time, I found that's my strength. I'm like able to hold it tightly and let it go when I'm holding it too close and maybe about to burn too brightly. So then I was able to build on a layer on from New York to Boston 229.
And that was 11 years after your first.
Yeah.
American.
Yeah. So exactly. So I ran.
What did I found here? Your 30th overall and American runner.
That was wild. I mean, it's interesting. It was totally wild. And it was also just like totally, it was kind of a hot day. And so to be running with people and just know, I'm such a nerd of the sport. I know who's around me and I'm like, that guy's really good. And then to be like, oh, I'm just going to, not really like a move, like I got to go now, but more like I'm feeling good. So I'm just going to move get some space to run and just to go ahead of that pack, and then realize that people had fallen off. I'll never forget, like in mile 22, I was going downhill around the Boston College Reservoir and just realizing like, oh wow, like people have fallen off and I have to get to Boston alone. Like it's on me to do it myself these next 4 miles. It was just a really pivotal moment, I think, in my running career where I realized like, okay, you're strong enough to do this, and you've sort of been relying on other people to get this far, and now you have to take a leap, which is just to continue doing the pace you've been doing, but it feels scary because you're like looking down the road being like, I need to go try to catch someone who's a block away.
Yeah. I mean, I always think you and like you've run with some great and incredible groups of people, Bauman Track Club probably being your top one. Your team, yeah. They are your current team. They have been together. You're one of your closest friends, who is also Patrick Reeves.
Yeah, Patrick. Yeah.
Through so many races, you've sworn blind that you stick together until you can't any longer.
Yeah, and then you got to go.
The races I've either watched you at, or the races I've also been running at, knowing you are obviously ahead as well. Not by far on the last ones, but
no, exactly.
But just like seeing these packs of people coming through together, these runners who stick stride by stride. I mean, that photo that comes into my mind is the one where you're all in the 4% of yellow
yes.
away, and your feet are in sync. And you are not all necessarily from BTC. No. You probably 80% of the people around you probably were, but there's one where you're in a race. You're next to like one of the jacuzzi boys, and
and we're all working together.
You're all working together, and that, to me, I've never had that. So I'm always interested in how that feels, because for me, I'm a solo runner.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting for me because I'm on the other side when it comes to my races of on race day, lock into like New York Marathon. I locked into one guy, and then we ended up with another group of guys for a while who just I snuck into their little group and just ran with them for as long as I could. And it was phenomenal. And I think back to Boston where I did it all by myself. And at the end where I was like, mile 24, having a gel at mile 24, and I'm this sucks. I really wish I was with that group. It is so daunting being by yourself when you.
I think in hindsight I realized you have to prepare for both. You really do have to think through mentally what both the moments you've run with people and it's worked out, and then the moments you've run alone and it's worked out. And so to be ready for both, like for instance, I had a teammate who was fitter than I was last December, going into the California International Marathon. We had done workouts to know like we could probably qualify for the trials. We ran 16 miles well below the qualifying pace, and we just thought like, okay, on the right day, or not even a perfect day, just like we have a number of chances to do it, or we have one day and like there's a good shot we could do this. And he went so far ahead of me that at the last 4 miles I thought like, well, I know I'm capable and he's way more capable. But then looking back, he's young, he's 22, he's fiery, and he's like so excited to just get after it. And in just discussing it with him after, he had wanted to be the aggressor. He had wanted to push, and he'd wanted to like really ride that line. And I had encouraged him to do that in maybe the last 10K, not the first 10K. But sure enough, right off the line, he was up, not at the front of the whole race where the pros were, but like, you know, at the lead of all the amateurs, pushing. And the irony is I could see him. I was like, he's right. I can see his head bopping, you know, I know what his stride looks like. And he was burning himself pretty brightly, such that at mile 16 we caught up to him. I'm like, how you doing? He's like, I'm fried, man. I'm so fried. And it was so sad because I knew that he had, you know, he felt like that was his path to success. So I respected, and he's learned a lot from it. But I had told him like, if you stay with me, I've done this race enough that I think you can launch away from me in the final miles. And it wasn't, I don't think he'd really thought through how many people would be around him. It's easy to say I was freaked out by all the stampede of people around me. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is like, yes, that's totally a thing. So then that's something you have to just prepare for, and not be surprised by. And so, yeah, he burned himself out. You know, it's like, silly about, I ended up running 2:19:02, so missing the trials by 2 seconds. And that means that everyone who was ahead of me qualified, everyone who's behind me, I become this like line where I'm like, you, and you, I know could have beaten me. And if you had like, you obviously would have qualified. So it's these, yeah, I have a lot of pride in how it turned out, but then it's also funny to look, I don't ever like talk trash in that way, but I'm like, come on guys, you could have beaten me. Like, you know, the people you wish the best for, you're like,
yeah, of course, just to give them that little bit of energy back.
Yeah.
But that was quite the journey. Your CIM to, let's say, your 2 years of 2018 and 2019 were just too close.
So yeah, in 2017 I ran 2:23, and I had written an essay I think often gets overlooked called Why Faster, right before that race, because I had run 2:28, and I think like a lot of people, you reach this middle ground of like numbers where you go like, maybe faster numbers would be better, but like I've already run some good races that I'm proud of, like, and I kind of thought anything in the 2:20s was just going to be like, I don't know, like better is faster is better, sure, but like it started to feel a little bit squishy and just like, I don't know. And then we ran 2:23, which was like, wait a second, that's way faster than I thought I could run. And it puts us within like
in Boston.
2:28 in Boston, yeah. So it's yeah.
And then the 2:28 in December of that year was CIM.
Exactly, right. And that set us as a team up to this idea of like, maybe it's possible to go even faster, which is totally absurd, because then it meant a whole nother 10 seconds per mile that I needed to cut off to get to the qualifier. But it was in the best way. It was
oh my God.
It's just like, in the best way, it was like, we kind of checked all the boxes of the little, the really meaningful experiences we'd wanted to have. You know, like I'd run New York and had a wonderful day, and Boston and had great days. And so then it was like, we think we have an outside shot at this, and we're not there's not a lot left on the list. No, you can make a whole new list. You could go to ultra, you could go around the international, but it was in terms of like sort of this domestic marathoning game that we were playing. So we were able to really put our head down, and I wrote a post called Burn the Boat, where I just said like, this is what we're doing. We're going all in for it. And it was amazing to see people's responses. Like I've put up a lot of essays now over the last 5 years about running, just because I've wanted to document my thoughts and feelings throughout the process. And that one in particular, I can actually see the stats every week of like how many people, and like 10 people will go and read it like on a random week. And I'm like, wow, there was no real reason to read it this week, but it must have, people reached out to me and they're like, that fired me up so much. You just like laid down the gauntlet of what it was going to take and how absurd it was, but how you were going to go after it and how you were probably going to fail, but that was okay. And so I try to give people the context of like, I had run a bunch of races that I was proud of, and that set me up to be like, let's just bite off maybe more than I can chew, because what's the harm? And, you know, and so people will reach out to me and say like, I want to go for the OTQ. And I'm like, that's wonderful. It's sort of like, I talk about it like little presents along the way or something. I'm like, but don't look past the really fun things you could experience in, you know, New York, for instance. It's not a fast course, but like, it's an amazing day. And don't just toss that aside because it's probably not that, it takes a really strong runner to qualify for the trials in New York, type of thing. So I in the spring of 2008, I laid out that we were headed for the trial, going to try to qualify for the trials, and I ran 3 marathons under 220, but over 219 in the coming 2 years. And it was an emotional roller coaster.
They were CAM in Houston?
Yeah. CIM. So first I ran 219.40, which was like a huge improvement, but also, you know, when you're 40 seconds off, you kind of have a sense you're not going to get it.
Yes. I was
you're like, say, okay.
You know, you're 4 minutes faster than where you were before.
Yeah.
And that's obvious when you're running, but that 40 seconds
it's
more
like,
than where you want to be is just glaring in your face the whole time, like on your forehead almost, like, nah, I'm just gonna hold you here for a minute. Get away. Why?
I was realizing afterwards that it's like, at that pace, it's about 200 meters of the track that I was about the 200 meter mark, and I would have had to be at the finish. So because it's about 80-second laps, and so it's like running 105 laps of the track and coming up like one half of the lap track short. Like you have a sense.
You do. 100% you do. And like I read your 2019 one, and you probably said this in every race you've ever run, every run you've probably ever set foot out on, of like, once it started to unravel a little bit, we all start looking at our watches. You don't look at your watch when it's going good, because you know, as a runner, if you've practiced enough, if you put the time into your training over the years, not just weeks, that's when you know your pace. And when you settle into it, you're like, I know exactly where I'm at right now because it feels like me.
Yeah, I think there's both. Well, there's that pace that you know well, and you know instinctually if you've practiced it. And then there's the pace inside the last 5K, just as a runner, when you know, I'm going to go as hard as I can and not fall over, kind of, you know? So
as fast as Usain Bolt to the finish line, you're actually running the slowest you have done with the
I know. Yeah, there was a video posted of me kicking into the final 100 meters, and my buddy was like, "Oh man, you were about to fall over," and I'm like, "That looks good to me in hindsight." Like, I don't know, I was still moving my feet together forward. Yeah. There's this amazing video I looked up. You can find the finish line camera from different races, and so I found the Cal International finish line camera, and I come across the line like, you know, right, and then there's a bunch of guys who are kind of hurling themselves like 5 seconds after, 6 seconds after, and then there's a guy he's clearly struggling, and he's really doing that dance, we call it, where he's like kind of wobbling. And he looks up maybe 25 seconds after 219, and he he just is like, he just kind of gestures his arm and then kind of like walks it in, like, and it's like this ship is leaving the station, the port, and you got to try to jump on. But it's like, it was, and then of course, if you wait 25 minutes, or 20, just up to 25 minutes, there's this amazing stream of women like throwing up their arms and like embracing each other. It's pretty uplifting. It's pretty wild to be like at those places where, the crowd is going wild. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. And Boston is, I think I this, I think we've had this conversation about TSP. It's the only race I've ever done multiple times, because I'm not a runner who does a race more than once. I'm generally okay. I've done it, and I've got it, because I'm not that competitive with myself or anyone else.
Interesting.
I'm less competitive with other people. I probably am more competitive with myself than anyone. But Boston is the one that I think I would just do it again, because I love running, and I loved it so much.
You were glowing the next day, like 24 hours later, you were just like exploding. And I was like, wow, all of us are rather fatigued from yesterday, but you were just like, I kind of knew, I could tell it had gone well even before I knew your result, just seeing it in your face. Boston is like, I think about it a lot because there are so many exciting races around the world, but that one, I think, just has a multiplier effect of it's the oldest, so it's the most important for some communities, so it's the most important for more communities. And then you do have this excitement because of the qualifying nature that we all gain momentum from each other, so I travel out to the start with people who are well under the qualifier, but we're surrounded by people who are just like taking it in, which it reminds you to really take it in, and that it's such a fortune to be there, and that it's such a special day, and that every day is different. I've run it 6 times now, and every day is, they're like these little precious gems that I can describe each different race and how it was, and how the weather was slightly different, and how that affected the mood differently. And so that maybe that could be true for any race, but I think for Boston, it's just that, times 10, times 100.
Yeah, it really does have something special. I remember seeing you and your team, well, not your team, but your corral, your special corral, walking into the start line of Boston. I was just like, there he is.
Yeah, I was so. What you're describing is I was fortunate to get called up off the wait list to be part of the elite start. So it was just like the most surreal experience to be surrounded by your running idols. When I trouble calling them idols now because I'm so much older than some of them. But you're like, Yuki, he won last year. And then, just these different Ethiopians, Kenyans, Japanese runners, American runners. So I got to line up behind them and then walk out and see my friends, yourself included, all in the first 10 who like ready to go. And so it's just, it's just a huge party, it's just this enormous experience that they put together that I think is very special. And it's special because we all show up and we agree to really try hard. I think the most angsty I get sometimes is when I've gotten a little, I don't aim to be this way, but I get a little angsty when I find people who are like just gonna jog Boston. And I'm like, my better self says like everyone should let everyone do what they need to do, and it's up to them. But the passionate, fiery person in me is like, the reason this event means so much is because we all come and we try to give it our all. And
how hard people fight to get their BQ.
How about and this like, I love to be in Boston the days leading up and then the days after, because you can just like across the street you can see a family and you can see that one of the parents is clearly the runner, and that they're like documenting that moment because it's their special moment to be on the like running's greatest stage, and it's just so meaningful.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is a special thing. I have a question for you about Bowerman Track Club. For how long have you been running with them?
So Bowerman Track Club is interesting because the professional ranks are one of the preeminent track programs in the country, and then as the amateur team, we're less organized than some running groups where there's no sort of enrollment fee. People often write us and say, like, what is your qualifying standards? And it's less organized than that, in that there's men's and women's groups. We communicate sort of as friends. It's like a group of friends that says, okay, we're gonna organize a run on this weekend or a workout on this day, and the admission for participating is showing up and then showing up again and showing up again. So I became friends with some other guys many of the people who participate in the group work at Nike, but certainly not all, and I no longer work at Nike. And so in 2014, a friend moved out to Portland, Patrick, that you mentioned, and he started to train on this cadence of focusing on the marathon. And I was interested in it, but like I said, I was just getting back into it. And so that what was so amazing was, with his enthusiasm combined with mine, combined with a few other people, we started to pull people in, such that we had a friend who'd never run a marathon join us and run 2:25 for his first ever race, just by being like, and we're like, you understand how insane that is? But he just, wanted to work out with the guys and be with friends. So, I mean, we try not to be cliquish. It's more just like, hey, if you want to show up, we'll communicate where we're planning to be. And then if you're interested in really committing, we have typically a rough workout schedule for the fall planned. That's why, like you said, it's been an emotional fall, realizing there won't be one of those build-ups, because I realized a few days ago that this will be the first time in 6 years that I don't have this methodical outline to and that's what a lot of us who love the marathon are dealing with, is realizing that on top of all the things that 2020 has thrown at us, part of that is that there won't be this cadence to the back half of our year, which is why I kind of love this Marathon Monday stuff you're doing. It's just trying to say, it's okay to artificially create structure around your weeks, because it gives us energy and it gives us life. And so the Bowerman Club has, I think people are always surprised by that there aren't really like qualifying standards, or there's no money to pay. It's more, and we have people come, I always say, like, if you're willing to check your ego at the door, you'll get along better with everyone. And we've had guys come out who are just clearly not at the level yet that we are, but are willing to modify. They're willing to say, like, oh, if you're running thousands, I'll run 800s. Yeah. I'll take a little extra rest and let it kind of ebb and flow. And that's awesome. We encourage it. We love it. Because people tend to self-select if they're willing to show up again and again. They tend to be of the right mindset, of the right work ethic. You get a couple people who stop by, thrash a workout and then disappear, and you're like, okay, this is just another day for us. Like,
that's such a big and important part of running, I think, is having grace and humility within yourself, because as much as it's a solo sport, in that you are the only person who is in control of your output internally and externally, but it's very easy to get onto a workout, be it a long run, be it a track workout or a race, and go shoulder to shoulder with a stranger or a friend and compare yourself and compete and have that ego inflated beyond its ability. And I think when you have that humility and grace to say, I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to put in the hard work to get there, and I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to go on this journey and show up and modify the workouts, learn from these guys and girls who are faster than I am, and do it week by week, run by run. rather than go smoke a workout and leave with a tail between your legs and never come up again because you're too embarrassed.
Yeah. And it just, for me, it's, I mean, I have a lot of respect. I know guys like our friend Matt Meyer who do a lot of their workouts alone. And I'm always texting him encouragement when I see the workouts he's put in, because he does, for life reasons, logistical reasons, like has to do a lot of his work alone. And I'm currently running at a faster pace than he is, but I look at his workouts, I'm like, I don't know if I could do that alone because of just the effect that I get training with my teammates. I think I personally get a lift whether I'm ahead of my teammates or behind them. I'll have a bad workout and see where the guys I'm typically with are finishing and think, okay, like, today I wasn't there for any number of reasons, but that's generally it. To me, it represents like where my fitness probably is generally. So I get this like, oh, I had a slight cold. I mean, in a hilarious turn of events, when we did Speed Project last March, I came down to the Speed Project, and the weekend went like crazy, totally all-consuming, wild adventure that I've written about. And then I entirely missed our final workout of the cycle for Boston. I just like skipped it. I just looked at my body's energy stores and said like, it's not even a thing. But I looked at what my teammates did, and I kind of lied to myself and said like, okay, that's probably what you generally would have done that because you know where you are in the mix. And so then I ran Boston 2 weeks later and ended up, I mean, it was some of my teammates' first Bostons, and they struggled like people do. And I beat several of them, and they were like, how did you beat us? You took that workout off. I'm like, yeah, but you did it. And like, I could see I gained confidence even though I didn't do it, which is absurd, but it, I was able to, yeah, exactly. It's one workout, and I did what I needed to do rather than just beating my head against the wall.
Yeah.
And pretending that I had energy I didn't have. So yeah, it's these amazing experiences. It's all these micro moments of realizing like, okay, what's the most positive thing I could take out of this? And sometimes it is challenging yourself, and sometimes it's being gracious to yourself and saying, I can't do this workout, but I know where I could have been.
And taking from that, I know you will never say not making an OTQ, having that 2-second difference. I've never heard you say the words failure at all. And I love that because it's not, I think it would be the biggest disservice to you and to running for those words ever to be associated with what you've achieved. I know in your mind it didn't meet what you wanted to achieve there and then, but it's still a freaking an incredible time.
I mean, thank you for saying that. It's, I don't think of it as something I purposefully, I'm not trying to make a statement by not saying it's a failure, but I'm also don't feel like, I know it wasn't a failure. To someone else and say like, he's run 2:19 3 times. And it was just like one of these like flattering things. And you're like, it sounds absurd because I logically know it's true that I've done that. But even when I hear someone else say it, I'm like, oh, I guess you're right. Yeah. I have like run 3 times faster than I ever thought I would because I was so focused heads down on this goal that it was a byproduct of the experience and the process that I was a part of. And so, there's a bitter taste in my mouth of not getting to say I'm an Olympic trials qualifier. But I realized very meaningfully that that's an external statement. That's like a badge of honor for other people. Yeah. And then I went to the trials and was on the course and was cheering for everyone and got to see how everyone did. I'm still trying to fashion this. It's like the longest it's ever taken me to write a piece, but I'm still trying to fashion the last 2 years into a proper essay describing what that journey was like. But what I realized on that day was like, it's all a spectrum, and you can cast it all as different tiers of success, and you very meaningfully can look at it. Everyone is finding the point at which they fail. So like failure and success, it'd be cliche to say it's just how you look at it, but it is, they're part and parcel with each other. So in the same way that I've started to see it as, I failed to make it into that event, and then other men who were right ahead of me and qualified, I saw where they reached their breaking point out on the streets of Atlanta. And then I got to see the men and women who, you know, finished 4th or 6th at the trials, and they're right up, you know, I was 1,000 meters from the finish of the trials saying like, you gotta go, you could make the Olympic team. And they're right up against their threshold. And so that has given me peace in hindsight, just to see that, oh, I really did. I reached my breaking point for the marathon and in that span. And it's important. Like that's where oh, my pup is so sad to be inside.
Stop to get me out.
I
know.
Yeah, so I have a big appreciation for where it ended up, and also just like respect both directions. You know, people will introduce me and compliment how fast I've gone, and I have appreciation for that, but also have been around so many fast runners, you know, like you have, that you get to, without false modesty, you just say, yeah, thank you. But also I've had the honor of getting beaten by quite a bit, you know, and getting to see what that looks like. So to finish Boston, you know, and then to talk to the pros who finished 10th or 9th and just be like, you did so well. There's still that disconnect. So people would be like, I can't believe you ran so fast. And I'm like, I know. And I can't believe how fast that guy ran. And
it's always, that's the beauty of it. There's always going to be someone else, really.
Exactly.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind that you dislike about running?
Oh, that I dislike about running? I think that's funny you ask, because 2020 has been such a 2020 has been hard for me because I haven't had a lot of momentum. And so, you know, we've all had too much time to think about like the why of why we run. And I know that in a global pandemic, for health reasons and mental health reasons, like I would continue to run. But I've struggled this year with that threshold of pushing myself, like without there being a grander thing that I'm building for. Part of that is the coming off of 2 years of having such a purpose. And so to always know for 2 years every day to know what I was building towards, there was always going to be some come down from that. But then to have, you know, I had plans to maybe try to get a bib to the 50th New York City Marathon and put that out on the horizon as a thing that was worthy of my, you know, effort and attention. So it's been a struggle of, I love just getting out and moving, but to really push has felt a little bit aimless the last 6 months, and that's what I'm struggling with, because I just, like anyone, I love the feeling after a workout of like, oh, I worked so hard and I kind of, you know, I feel depleted and it's so worth it. Yeah. But to sort of burst that bubble of from comfort to discomfort, true discomfort, has been particularly hard this year. Like we said, like we started off talking about consistency. There's a point at which my running last fall became so methodical that it felt like a bicycle. Like my stride felt like I could just layer on more miles and more miles, and it was just like, oh, I'll go do a 7-mile double just because it's a bicycle. And so then to not have that has been it's frustrating, you know, you're like, oh.
Yeah, and to feel change. I think understanding that for as you say, you've had 2 years of the joys of running training and consistently challenging yourself to that goal, and then coming off of that and to possibly go out because you feel you get back into some sort of a rhythm or cadence and you go and do 2 runs. Like I may, for example, get out in the morning and go for a run with Austin and Dot. And we won't run too far or too fast because we have a dog with us and it's hot in the morning, and just get out to move. And it's, you know, start the day how we all love to start the day as runners. And then in the afternoon, I'm like, oh, I'll do some speed work. And over this past few months of just being like, oh, why? What's the point? What am I built? What paces am I going to run at? Like, what am I going for? Why? What's the point in going for another run? You've already run today and you've got no race. And I personally forgot a little bit about why I loved running and why I ran in the first place, before the medals, before the goals. I ran because I loved running. I literally, and so I started running again without a watch. I just started getting out. I just took my watch off and was like, you know what? I don't care about sharing it to Strava. I don't care what other people think or don't think about my runs. I need to reconnect with me and my running.
Yeah.
So I can see where I am truly at in my head. And that was the weirdest thing.
That's really great. I mean, it speaks to the fundamentals of what gets everyone going. But it's like having to tap into that, the simplicity of it. I think that one of the weirdest things of this era of running is just the average pace. Knowing your average pace for a run wasn't something that was possible until somewhat recently with GPS watches. And so I was reminiscing with friends. I'm like, remember when we all used to you had a Timex, maybe you had but you would go and do your run and you ran for 42 minutes or 44 minutes and your run was, you know, like, let's just say 6.7 or it was like somewhere in the ballpark of 7 miles. And maybe this is speaking to my non-type A, like I wasn't driving my routes and knowing exactly the hundredths, but it used to be easier to lose yourself in just sort of the routine of it. And right now, I think sometimes the numbers can certainly be a benefit, and sometimes they can hold us back from just like feeling it again.
I wholeheartedly agree. All right, another fun question for you. With what you're talking about right now and goals and how reminiscing about how things have changed, your dad has been I just adore everything you say about your dad. You have this phenomenal photo that somebody captured of you almost crawling on the floor after was it CIM or was it Houston?
That was CIM.
To your dad, who was at the finish line, as a running dad and a runner. And there was obviously no sound because it's a photo, but you can just see and feel that it probably didn't need any words. Your dad didn't need to say anything. You didn't need to say anything to your dad, but then this like unspoken, like, dude, I'm so proud of you. And you're not going to realize that for hours right now, but it's so beautiful. And then the way you talk about him after, just like, you know, he's always there. He's got me into this, like, damn you. but that support is phenomenal. And like, you're a father of a gorgeous boy. And is there anything that you take from your dad that you, if your son turns around and says, Dad, I want to be an Olympic marathon runner, Is there anything that you have in your mind that you would pass down that you've learned from seeing your dad run, your dad seeing you run, and you guys talking about it?
Yeah, it's so much. I mean, I feel so fortunate. I've written about how my dad had health trouble 6 years ago, and we thought we might lose him. Yeah. And so the fact that he's still here,
yeah,
it's a double bonus of I'm having this chapter, and he's still here, and so it's all gravy. And it's not to say like it's all a bonus, just do whatever. Sometimes I think we can build up so much pressure that we can say, just being here is a blessing. There's no pressure. It's like, no, there is pressure. But in the best definition of the word, when I say that we didn't say much to each other at the finish, it can sound harsh, like he was quiet or I was angry. But I've thought back on it, and like, it sounds silly, but it's sort of this extension of the most emotional sports moments I've ever had in my life, which is absurd because I'm almost 40, and like, why, talk about, a bonus and the gravy on top, like extra. When I think back to like my first disappointing sports experience that I was not ready for, it was like a soccer match in 3rd grade or something. I was a little boy, but I was crushed. I forget a lot of the details why, but like we lost a game and I was just so crushed and I was so sad, and I was this little boy, and my dad comforted me, and he just like reinforced that I tried really hard, the team had tried really hard. And so then in the nicest, simplest way possible, sitting there, like, 30 years later, being like, I just missed the Olympic trials qualifier, Olympic trials in Atlanta by 2 seconds. It is the same as like a little boy's soccer match, and it's a parent who's there for his son. And it's all for fun. It's all like to infuse love and excitement and meaning to life. And none of it was life or death. None of it, it infuses more opportunity to care for each other and celebrate life. But it honestly wasn't more or less meaningful than my 3rd grade final game of the season. And along the way, you have like highs and lows in high school and highs and lows in university, where it wasn't going to be the litmus by which my father, loved me or not. It's just he's been able to be there and support me. And so like when people say like, is your son going to be a runner? My son is a very active little boy, and he sees us move. But I just want him to live a passionate life, investing like himself in the best way into whatever hobbies and events and communities that I think that's what we were taught, is just to give things your all and not be afraid to try hard and not be afraid to, it's that whole discussion around failure, like not be afraid to come right up to your limits, because that's where a lot of fun can be had, and that's where life is beautiful. And so that just to celebrate that. So I mean, the thing I would most want to avoid is my son thinking that because I'm a runner, that's exactly what he needs to do in order to celebrate life. Any number of things could be that thing for him. And it's like trying not to cling too closely to one archetype of what life can be like. Now, I think it's wonderful to have a shared vocabulary with family members, and so my father grew up as a runner during the 70s and was not all that fast. My mom always likes to say, I must be the fast one, even though I don't run. Both the boys are faster than you. So, and it's true. She kind of seems like a natural athlete, even though she is athletic. And so, but what's allowed me to write about running so much is knowing that my dad has talked to me about the sport growing up gives me a lack of a fear of sort of venturing out into the unknown, and not, it's like I've grown up hearing about running and reading about running. And so when a thought comes to mind for me, and I realize I haven't read a lot of stuff that describes this experience. I should jot that down. That's where the genesis, a lot of my pieces have come from. Not to say I'm the only one ever, but just to say, oh, it's probably worth writing down, because maybe other people will benefit, or maybe other people will commiserate or see something similarly or differently, and, you know, we could have a discussion about that. So that's where, you know, I send things to my dad, because he's a sort of he went to law school. He doesn't practice as a lawyer, but he has a fine tooth attention to writing, and so he's able to both see what I mean, but also correct my grammar and spelling, and also appreciate what I'm trying to share.
In typical dad form as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So on that vein, what do you have as a writer? 2 questions about words that I want to ask you. Do you have a favorite word?
Oh. It's funny you ask that, because I've been, as I write more, I'm trying to avoid falling into routines that are too formal, you know, like sort of ruts. You don't want to get stuck in a rut and do it over and over. But I would say BUT, like the contrasting, what I do a lot of is 2 sentences separated by a comma that contrast each other, to try to illuminate the details of something by highlighting the context in which the thing is that I'm describing, and then pivot from that and say, you know, although all of us who lined up for the elite start of the Boston Marathon are experienced, like that, although that's true, but some of us, this was our first time and got to be hit with a wave of emotion. So I do a lot of things like that, because I think that's how my mind works, is I'll often tack this way in order to tack back that way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It's a meaningful it ties you into more of what you do.
Yeah.
And then the second word question is, what's the first word that comes to your mind that you always spell incorrectly?
Oh. Well, the one, like, it's slightly differently than you might intend it. Affect and effect. Oh. So it's 2 words that I misuse. Yeah. I routinely have to go into Google and just like try to decipher it again, even though I should know by now. But because I'm always writing about these contexts that are tumultuous and that then have an effect or an effect on, and I'm like, yeah. And then I just try to, and then I write my right. I either take the time to make sure it's right, or I go and try to write my right around it, in order to not just drop a bomb in the middle of my sentence that I'm trying to express.
I love it. There are so many words that I'm constantly, I type and then I have to I don't trust the autocorrect on my phone or on the laptop, and I'm like, I know. I just need to Google this. I'm not too sure that letter's supposed to be there, or is it supposed to be
It never looks right. It never,
It's ridiculous. So one question that's going to take us back to Speed Project, and then I promise I'm not going to take more of your time, because I did say it wouldn't take that long.
No, that's okay.
I want to link it into Speed Project just selfishly, because that was one of, I think, just it's one of the biggest events of my recent running life, part of my biggest year of my life in running and many other ways. And just to have watched you be part of the Tracksmith team the year before.
Oh, yeah.
As I was a host for the race, watch you back out with sun chasers and end up in hospital.
Oh my gosh.
To then have you as our coach, as our lead, as our crew for the BRS team at TSP5, and just go to those places, and what I'm going to refer to is a time I talk about a lot in class when I'm teaching people about running when they think they're done, when you think you're cooked, when you are literally a heartbeat away from just sitting down on the spot and saying no. And I don't know whether you remember this, it's burnt into my brain. We were on one of the gazillion uphills that we did early on the second day in the morning, and it was so freaking steep.
It was so windy too.
Yep. And we were doing 3 minutes, I think, each. Thereabouts. In and out of the car. There was wild card Jason, Sean and I in the car.
Yeah.
And Bromka was there as our coach. And there was just points where I got out and we were nearing the top, or we looked like the top. It wasn't the top. It was another corner. But anyway.
Yeah.
You let me go just long enough by myself where I was teetering on the edge, just turning around and tapping out. Because I knew I could. The car was so close.
Yeah.
We were such a tight team that I could have just been like, I'm done. I need to sit down. I need to swap out. And then you just like floated up like this angel who had hours of sleep when you hadn't slept for like 4 days, and just got me up that hill. Talking to me and just being like, you're not going to give up. And I don't remember the exact words of what you were telling me, but I remember the gist of what you were telling me was, I know you're stronger than this. I know you know you're stronger than this. I know that you can do this, and I know you don't want to give up. Like, keep going. And we rounded that damn corner, and it wasn't flat or a down.
That was a low moment.
And then the car took off, and that was always the most heartbreaking part of those, even those short bits, was when the car took off and you're like, oh God, I've really got to find that car. And there was Jason in the distance waiting on a hill. Like, he still had to go up this hill, but you stayed with me, but you weren't ahead of me, and you weren't literally by my side. You were just on my shoulder, but you were there in such a like guidance and reinforcing energy. And it always makes me think, you did that for me, and you've done that for everybody else on our team during that whole 2 nights of madness, and I'm sure you've done it for so many people in your career. How do you do that for yourself in those times where you look at your watch and you think, how can I do this?
It's funny, this is where I feel like, having been a lifelong runner, when I was able to work through all like the coming out of college and coming out of having run Boston a few times, I had been injured a lot. I had a lot of failed goals at times I had wanted to hit. And so I was just sort of too hard on myself. And that's why I kind of stepped away from the sport. I just started to associate it with frustration and pain and suffering. But like, as I've come back to it, I realize I've been around running for a long time, and probably one of the earliest lessons that I ever learned was when we had the mile run in gym class. And this was on a cinder track. We didn't have a polyurethane track yet. So we would, we get out there, and I forget, maybe it was twice a year, maybe it was more than that. And the teacher would always say, like, don't walk. If you don't think you can keep going, just slow down a little bit and keep jogging, because you'll go way faster, you'll feel better, and you'll finish sooner. And so it's funny because that was just the mile run, but it's also when you're a little kid and it feels like so far. And so the thing I always challenge myself to do in those moments is really try to back off, but in just the slightest way. And what I think I've learned, it starts there, is like, you'll definitely reach the points where there's every reason why you would feel like you could walk. And what you learn over time is that well, sometimes you will walk. I mean, I've been reduced to a walk when I've been sick or when I've been on, medication for illness and just been like, wow, I don't have it today. But if you do have it, then the challenge is, could you back off 2 seconds a mile and see if your heart rate can settle just slightly, see if your effort and breath rate can settle to a manageable level. And could you find your gear there? Because then you'd only be losing 2 seconds a mile, which is basically the same. And maybe you can calm down your nervous system and calm down your mind and stop judging yourself and just try to settle into something that is sustainable. And so that's where, I mean, like when I said, when I reached the breaking point in the 3 marathons where I started to slip below Olympic trials qualifying pace, I really tried not to look at my watch, because that was going to be some objective number that was I knew my mind would judge too harshly and would sort of assume, oh, if I've given back 2 seconds a mile, next time I look, it's going to be 4, next time it's going to be 8, and your mind spirals that way. And so having been around the game long enough to know that's what my mind will do, so just don't give it the input. Don't look at your watch. And yeah, it's like going up that hill, which was terribly steep and terribly windy, which was just terribly long. Yeah, I really thought I might lose you when I basically had said the next one's the last one, and then it wasn't the last one. I thought, I've just straight up lied. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep. But yeah, just to say, like, it's almost always within a margin that if you can challenge yourself to back up just slightly, then you can both ride, you can find a gear to ride, and then maybe you can, ramp it back up at a later moment.
That's exactly what you did for me, and it worked.
That was awesome. That was a fun day.
It was so much fun. Ridiculous, but fun. Okay, yes. Fun question now. If you have a choice between 2 superpowers, being invisible or being able to fly, which would you choose?
Oh, fly. Yeah, definitely. I think invisible makes sense for all sorts of fun life reasons, but fly definitely, particularly as a runner, you start to feel like, okay, yeah, that's what we're always chasing, right? So
yeah, exactly. And if you could have a billboard, an old-fashioned billboard, printed with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Oh man. I mean, I think it would have a whole smattering of some of the best of all the people's faces and the moments that I've had along the journeys that we've just described. It's all these mental pictures that I mean, honestly, I'm a very visual thinker, and so I often I take snapshots with my mind just sort of naturally, and then I'm always thinking back to, I can picture the field where I lost that soccer match in 3rd grade. I can picture, the mile run in elementary school. And so some of those, I posted a photo yesterday on Instagram, which was just from before the start of CIM this year, which was a friend, Jody Bailey from Canada, joined us to the race, and he took a photo of the 4 of us teammates running in the dark. It's just our footfalls, and we're almost all in flight with the shadows of the silhouettes. And to me, that's teamwork. It's preparation, and yeah, I don't put up a lot of things around because I think I have them all in my head.
That's the one you could get printed and hang.
Yeah, printed it. And then there's a saying. I attach a lot of meaning to quotes and conversations, and a lot of those things weave through my essays and weave through my Instagram posts. But I don't always think of them as motivational quotes per se, but they're just like moments throughout my life that I find motivational. But there's one that leading into CIM 2018, when it was going to be my first attempt at the OTQ, I was really trying to mentally prepare for just the unknown and how absurd it was going to be, because I'd run 10 marathons already, but I was like, this is going to be unlike, I'm going to have to throw off the reins of anything I've done before. And so I was messaging with a friend who I ran with in college, and she's very tough. She's like a hard worker, hard trier, just a badass. And she just, it like makes me tear up. But she was like, remember to run fast because you can.
Oh. Which
was so meaningful because it meant, it was like in that moment of doubt, which was inevitable, just to return to everything we just discussed, which was like, keep running fast because you can. And wrapped into that was, you know, she's well beyond her competitive years. She was saying, you know, like, you have a responsibility to yourself to do what you're capable of.
Oh.
Making me cry.
No, I'm sorry. No, I love it about you, though. You are like the most raw and wonderfully emotional people I know.
It's like right at the surface when I talk about these things. Exactly. But it was.
There's how much you love it.
Yeah, it's because it feels very real to me, and so I can picture the moment, what the moment looked like in California the day when I reached like full breaking point. And I just thought like, okay, you're 5K from the finish. You've run faster to this point than you've ever run. The only thing you can do now is to run fast because you can run fast, and to not spend any time with negative self-talk, convincing yourself that, you know, you should be slow or that you're not doing it. And so that to me was like maximizing that last moment, which was in many ways, you know, statistically, like the moment of failure was actually like, you're able to turn it into something that you're proud of still.
Yeah, that is a lesson to live by. They are great, like great kind of words. I think that you turn it into a lesson to live by. That's beautiful. That really is. Yeah, get to run fast because you can, no matter what. And I know that right now, amongst everything else that's going on, you're struggling with a good friend of yours not being in, you know, that, you know, he's coming through, but he's just a freaking raging machine.
Yeah, it's there's all these things that remind you it's a gift to be out here, because there's so many things that could take it away.
Yeah, and you really are a massive inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
So many people, and I feel very lucky to know you and have run with you, shared moments of running, both watching and actually putting steps in together, and learning from you, because man alive, do I learn a lot from you.
Oh, thank you. It's so fun to be a part of this, where people can, you know, give to each other, you know, give and take lessons and moments of inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. And I know the whole community at Peloton have been supporting your fundraising for Tommy.
Oh yeah.
Continuing to get there.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Yeah, I mean, so I can't see it on a podcast, but I'm still rocking a totally absurd beard. Because my friend Tommy Ribs is undergone his 3rd round of chemo, and appears to be both defying so many odds and also still in a tough spot. And so it's been amazing to see, in a time when a lot of people are going through a lot, the community of runners around the world rally to support a man who's given so much to them. So I consider myself super lucky to be, you know, just like a new friend of a man who has, you know, has inspired thousands around the world. And so, yeah, it's been, I really appreciate the donations that came through the Peloton community. It was wonderful to be able to just give to his family and say, you know that you've given us so much, and that we want to give back to you. And then to have them say from the onset, like, thank you. We need this. We actually do need this support, and any money we don't end up needing for medical bills, we'll be excited to pass along to the, you know, local Native American community. And so just to say, like, communities helping each other and also having a plan for how to pay it forward. Yeah, so it's it could almost become too much, if that's possible, on the inspiration or sort of meaning scale, to have a friend who's in the hospital, who you see as like the definition of embracing life and going, all out. To see him unable to do so really just, it means so much, that in terms of supporting him and in terms of reminding each of us, and particularly myself, like to maximize and to take advantage and to give thanks. So it's helpful right now, as times are not easy. So it doesn't make maybe sometimes the day-to-day of living in COVID forest fire times easier, but it helps you keep peace of mind. It helps me keep peace of mind.
Yeah, right. Yep, it definitely does. It definitely does. Well, thank you.